It's knowing your family. It's knowing your family culture. It is knowing what your vision and your goals are for your family and the atmosphere you want to have in your home. And deciding if there are certain parenting practices that will align with that or not. And it's okay to say no.
Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course, because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening.
Let's try something fun for the summer. Maybe if it is received well, if you like this, we can go beyond the summer. But I thought it would be fun to do an episode or two this summer with a Q&A, where you get to ask me some questions and I will answer them in an episode. So what I have done is created just a very simple form that you go ahead and just pop your question in. It'll get sent over to me, and I will then hopefully have an episode out here in the summer about it. So the link is going to be in the show notes. However, let me just tell you what it is as well. It is going to be a bit.ly link. Those are just a way to shorten links that I don't have to give you a bunch of letters and numbers that mean nothing to you. Basically, it is bit, spelled bit.ly/homeschool question. That's all you do. Type that into your browser or go ahead and tap the link in the show notes, and then you'll be able to go ahead and put a question. This question could be about homeschool. It could be about parenting, faith, anything. Go for it. I would love to be able to answer your questions. Let's get into today's podcast episode. The title is 4 Controversial Things That We Did in Our Parenting. Now, you notice that I put controversial in quotes, right? And I'm doing the air quotes right now. These were things that people have opinions on, and you might have opinions on them as well. So that's where the controversy comes into play. You might agree and be like, there's no controversy for me, and then, okay, great. But there might be for some of them, or you might disagree with all of my takes on this. But this is where my husband and I landed in raising our kids. Just to remind you, we now have a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old. So we're at the further end, and I can see now whether these were a good idea or not a good idea. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. We have no regrets about these decisions that we made, the things that we did not do. And you may not agree with our decision on this, and that's okay. My goal here, though, is to help you see that you can say no to these 4 things, and you can say no to 4 other things, and 4 other things after that. And your kids will turn out great. We had friends that didn't see this the same way, these 4 controversial things. They did it differently, and their kids were okay too. And they've turned out fine. And so it isn't necessarily a make it or break it kind of thing. There are some things in parenting that will have a huge impact. But it's knowing your kids, it's knowing your family, it's knowing your family culture, it is knowing what your vision and your goals are for your family and the atmosphere you want to have in your home, and deciding if there are certain parenting practices that will align with that or not. And it's okay to say no. It was hard at times for these things, and I'll talk about it specifically for each one, how it was hard to say no and to stick to our decision. And it got difficult at times. What I want to encourage you to do is to follow the Holy Spirit and to have reasons for the things that you decide to opt out of, the things that you decide not to do as a Christian homeschool parent. When we have reasons, that will help us to continue to do or not do the thing. And it will also help you to be able to have conversations with your kids. If you have a 3-year-old, you could give a little blurb, a couple of words as to why you don't do something, and they're going to like it or not like it, and they'll move on and most likely forget that you said that. But as your kids get older, if you don't have reasons for why, they're going to have less respect for that, and they're going to probably push the boundaries a little bit more. And again, every child is going to be different. Some are going to push boundaries very easily. It's going to come to them by nature. And some of them are just going to be very compliant. And then you're going to have ones that are in the middle. But follow the Holy Spirit's prompting in your parenting. Be in line with your husband. Sometimes there are things, and these 4 things I'm going to go over, one of you might feel really passionate one way or the other, and the other one doesn't. I would say lean into the one that feels passionate about it, because it might be the Holy Spirit leading them. It might have to do with your own upbringing. It might have to do with your own view of the world and what you have seen, and lean into that wisdom. And then to have reasons for why you are not participating. Sometimes you're going to be asked by your kids. Sometimes you'll have the opportunity to be able to share that with others and maybe make them, think a little bit about their decision with this topic, whether they continue in it or not. I think it's really important for us to make decisions based upon intentionality and not just because everybody else is doing it. Now, this list was put together just kind of last minute in an Instagram reel, and then it was shared over to Facebook. Instagram received it quite well, and Facebook, not so much. And Facebook can sometimes just be a dumpster fire. People just, the things that they would never say to your face, they will very easily type it to you. However, one of my oldest, bestest friends sent me a text one day and said, "Hey, I was on Facebook and this reel came across," and I was like, "Oh, yeah. We don't do that," because I titled it for controversial things that we didn't do. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, we don't do that. Oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't do that." She's like, and then I looked and realized that it was you. I was like, oh, that's so funny. But I decided to do this episode just to kind of follow up a little bit more with that. Thankfully, that going slightly viral has died down and the crazies have disappeared and they've gone on to harass somebody else probably. But I was like, you know what? I would like to add a little bit more meat to the bones of these different topics because there was only maybe a line or 2 that I could put in the description. So let's get into it. Number 1, this one's going to be a super obvious one, but it wasn't necessarily when I put it out on social media. It wasn't obvious to people who didn't know who I was and what platform and what I'm championing, is that a word? I don't know, but I'm pushing the homeschoolers, pushing families to homeschool. And so the first controversial thing that we didn't do in our parenting was to stay in the school system. So basically, we left the school system. We tried it out. If you've been here for a little while, you know that we did. We tried it out for a few years, and it caused a lot of stress in our lives. It caused just a lot of just contention. It caused an uneasiness, a lack of peace in our home. Our daughter was very stressed about it, stressed about the performance that she was doing in school. She was a wonderful student, but it still stressed her out. If she didn't get the answer to a math problem right the first time, it crushed her spirit. And then our son, he was, we'll say, we're going to add some more air quotes here, in trouble often because he had a lot of spirit. He still has a lot of spirit. And by removing him from the school system, that spirit was not crushed. And we were able then to guide him as to how he can use that well and how he can glorify God and not to be constantly berating or knocking him down. We were able to then come alongside him. So the number 1 here, and this is in no particular order, but controversial thing that we did in our parenting was that we left the school system and we never looked back. Never looked back. It has been, it's been 15 years now since we made that decision, and I've not regretted it at all. And so we have to think in those terms am I going to regret not doing this? And so with homeschooling, I think that maybe I would have regretted it. Maybe I wouldn't have known the other side, but I have 0 regrets from taking them out of the school system. And then our youngest never went into the school system. So he's my little, prodigy here as he's now finished up with his 11th grade year and has 1 more year to go. I'm like, wow, where did the years go? But the controversial thing can be in the church that we are leaving the school system. It can cause fragmentation among relationships, or maybe you decide to never put your kids into school and other families, other people can feel like you're judging them. And maybe at some points you kind of are. You're like, come on, don't you see what's going on? Get your kids out of there. Make the sacrifice, make the changes and the adjustments, and leave the school system. Number 2 is that we decided not to do sleepovers. I do have an entire episode all about sleepovers, and I will link that in the show notes for you. That'll go a little bit more in depth into this topic. So this comes from my own experience, and I didn't do sleepovers when I was younger. It wasn't a thing. Yes, I would go and maybe spend a weekend or the week of vacation Bible school at my grandparents' house in the summer. But I didn't do sleepovers with friends when we were younger. It just wasn't a thing. It was more so middle school and definitely high school. I watched movies that my parents would definitely not have approved of. And I don't know if I've admitted even now at the age of 49 to them the movies that we watched. And this was before cell phones and before screens and all these things. Yeah, we would pick up the phone, it'd be a landline, and we would prank call people, maybe prank call some boy that somebody liked, and he'd say hello, and we would say hello in some weird voice and then hang up on him. And that was the silliest thing we did. But I knew that the environment wasn't something that I wanted my kids to be in and to be faced with those decisions and to be exposed to things. And now that there are phones and screens and all the things, it just seems like it's not worth it. Now, sleepovers were introduced to my kids when they were in elementary school. Kids were having sleepovers with each other among our friend group. And I was like, I'm not really quite on board with this. I just want my own kids to sleep through the night, let alone adding some other kid who's never slept here before. And when you sleep somewhere else, you don't really sleep very well. Say you go on vacation. I know for me, it might take a couple of nights and then I get used to sleeping there, but it's never as good as sleeping home. So I'm like, why would I want to have that possibility of having my sleep interrupted by somebody else's child? And what if they're crying in the middle of the night? And it just seemed weird to me. I'm like, I just want my kids to get sleep. They need sleep so that the next day we can all function well. There was just that question of if something could happen. And I didn't want to live with the regret of if something did happen. And so I'm going to encourage you that if you are not quite sure, you're on the fence about this, or you'd like more information, to listen to that episode about sleepovers. I don't want to beat a dead horse? Is that it? I guess. But I don't want to reiterate everything that I said in it. But it was controversial at the time, and we were the weirdos, even among our church friends. We were the weird ones that did not participate in sleepovers. And this was even oftentimes with like certain clubs, like a Christian boys club or something. Or girls. And unless my husband or I was staying overnight as well, our kids didn't participate in it. They would stay late and do all the fun things, and then we would bring them home. Yep, we were the weirdos, and I have absolutely zero regrets about it. And my kids understood to a point, but they didn't fully understand at that time. We would say what we could, what we felt was appropriate, and we weren't like, no, you can't go at all. You can go to the birthday party up until the sleepover part, and then I'll come and get you, or up until like a decent time, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., if that's a late night for them, and that would be exciting. Then go ahead and do that. But they didn't maybe fully understand. And now that they are teens and young adults, they completely see our side of things and they're not angry about it at all. Number 3 is the controversial thing that we did was that we kept our children in the church service. Now, for some of you, your church services might be like, I don't understand. How is this controversial? Because maybe there is no option of a Sunday school during the church service. So I'm speaking right now to those who do have the option of it. And again, you can make your own decision, but this was our decision that we made. When they were babies, they were with me. I didn't put them into nursery, and probably maybe about 18 months or so, I think I would put them into nursery because they were fine. They didn't necessarily need me right then. They could go ahead and play, and then I actually was able to sit and enjoy a service. And sometimes I was called out of service to go and get them because they weren't happy about being apart or something was going on. So it wasn't always a guarantee. And I think I remember having them, and it wasn't a hard and fast rule. This one was one that just kind of became a bit more organic in how we thought about it. And so they would be in maybe nursery until maybe like 3 or 4, or maybe up through kindergarten. I don't know. I can't really put an exact time or age upon it. But we did then start to keep them in the church service. Now, the church we were attending was growing, and there would be more things that were being offered. And at one point, so it was, I guess, well, I'll say, when we first started attending, it was just one service. Then it became two services, and then they ended up adding a Sunday school hour, probably somewhere, it was probably in between. There's probably a first service, a Sunday school hour, and then a second service. So you could go to first service and Sunday school, or Sunday school and second service. And I figured the kids got their Sunday school. Why would they need a second Sunday school and hang out with the kids and still do a lesson? I'm sure that it was absolutely fine. My really good friend was in charge of the children's ministry, so I knew that she kept a pretty good watch on everything, and I knew that theologically everything was fine, but I just was like, I don't understand why the kids can't sit here in church. And then they started adding the middle school and high school who would have their own type of lesson during the church service. And I think it was that they would stay in for the worship and then leave for the sermon time. And I was like, I don't understand why a 15-year-old can't listen to this sermon or an 18-year-old can't listen to this sermon. It just felt really weird to me because growing up, I was always in the service. Was it hard at times having 3 young children in the service? Yes. But it was our goal to be able to teach them, how do we act in such a scenario? How do we act in service? So that just becomes a natural thing that they do. And for quite a few years, we'd have to keep our boys separated, not because they were being bad, maybe a little naughty, but they really enjoyed each other. And when they got together, there was just always a bit of ruckus. So was our seating arrangement. We had a boy, one of the boys. So think of us in a row at church, boy, and then a parent, then the girl, our daughter, then another parent, and then at the further end was our other son. So they were 3 people in between the 2 of them. Once in a while, they kind of catch each other's eye, and, we'd have to, put a kibosh on whatever they're going to start giggling about. But they learned how to sit and to maybe just draw. I allowed them to draw, or they would have their Bible and kind of look through that. As they got older, they would start to take notes. There was a couple of years where one of my boys would draw a picture that had to do something with the sermon. And then afterwards, he would run up and he would give that picture to the pastor. And it's just one of my most favorite memories. So it felt at the time odd because this was actually us attending 2 different churches. We moved at some point here. And we were one of the very few, if not the only family at some points that had their kids in the service. I wanted them to know what it felt like. I wanted them then to do this for so many years that when they got older, they can go into any church service and yeah, it might be a little bit different, but they feel comfortable. They know how to act and they know that they can listen to something that's a sermon that is speaking higher than them. That's how we homeschooled them. It was a challenge to their brain, and it gave us as a family things to talk about, a way to connect. So absolutely 0 regrets on keeping our kids in the church service. Number 4, this one gets a little dicey with people. People definitely get opinionated and maybe get their feelings hurt. This is not meant to hurt anybody's feelings, but we decided to say no to popular video game systems. We had at some point, I think it probably came out maybe on QVC or something, like an old Atari system. It was like a re-engineered thing that I got from my husband one Christmas. We had that. We barely ever played with it. They did end up at some point with some old system, and it had like one game. It was like a car racing game on it. And we would allow them to play that once in a while. But there seemed to be, at that time when they were younger, just new systems that were constantly coming out. I guess Nintendo, PlayStation. I don't even know the names of these things, guys. This is how out of it I was. But I think during that time, like Minecraft came out. There might have been a new Mario game. And there was just a lot. And they really, really, really wanted these systems. So a couple reasons why we said no. First was we didn't have the budget for it. It wasn't something that we could pay for. And so, yeah, you're like, oh, okay, it could maybe be a Christmas present from grandparents or a couple of grandparents. We could all go in together. But I was like, there's other things, other toys, things that they could build and use their imagination with. I'd rather use maybe that Christmas money or that birthday money towards something like that instead. The second reason was we recognized that at least one of our boys could have an addictive personality to that. and that this was going to feed into it, and it wasn't going to be something good. It was going to be something that we would then have to help him to break away from. So why introduce something that you are going to have to break away from, that you're going to have to then break that addiction for them? And so the third one was, there was just some questions that I had in my mind. I just heard some rumblings here or there about video games and screen time and just the overall addiction to it and just what it did to a child's brain. There was no science that I knew, but there was enough talk, I would say, online or news, maybe in books. There wasn't everything you have now, podcasts and all this kind of stuff. But there was enough that just kind of made my heart to be unsettled. And my husband agreed. He's like, no, I don't necessarily think we need to do this. Now, does this mean that they didn't play these video games ever? No, they would go to a friend's house and maybe play a video game. And there were some that I was definitely against. Call of Duty, there were some things that was definitely against. And the friends that they hung out with did not have those video games. They would play maybe a Mario Brothers or something like that. And these were friends then that had restrictions. And so I do have friends that ended up getting their kids some of these systems, and they had restrictions. It was like on a Saturday for 1 hour. And I was like, well, to me, that wasn't worth the money. Maybe grandma and grandpa gave it to them, so it's not a big deal. But there was opportunities that they did have it, but then when we were home, they couldn't ask for it. I didn't have to hear them over and over and over again asking for it. And so it was very limited. I would say within a month, they might have played an hour or two at the most of some type of video game each month. There was a grocery store or two that we would go to once in a while, and they had like a children's area, and the boys would love to go, and I would drop them off, and I'd be done shopping, and I think you had like an hour max that you could leave your kid, and I would just kind of walk slowly so I could maybe get an hour break. But all they would do is like play the Mario Brothers or something like that at it, and the woman would just laugh. I was like, yeah, it's because we have no video games at home. So when we come here maybe once, twice a month, that's just what they would play. She knew they'd be no trouble. Other kids would come, they'd want to do puzzles and all kinds of stuff because they probably had video games at home. So they would get to do that. And it was just kind of more of a fun thing. So it wasn't like we were like, no, we just did not want it in our house. We just didn't want that point of contention that we could possibly have with them. They look back now and they're like, I'm glad. Actually, they will say, my boys will say, I'm glad that we didn't have that because it forced us then to spend that time outside, to play in the mud and to do other things, and they don't miss out on it. Are there maybe benefits to video games for boys and young men? Maybe. I just didn't want to take that risk. And I'm not saying that those that do play video games, if there's anything wrong with them, but I just know from my boys' point of view right now, they have friends that are addicted to video game systems and playing video games, and they're glad that they didn't have to deal with that. There's always going to be something, but overall, I don't regret it. My husband doesn't regret it, and our kids don't regret it. Neither of these things do they regret. So you might see eye to eye on all of these or some of these things with me. If you don't see eye to eye on any of them, that's okay too. I just want to encourage you to think about these and other things. There's so many other things in parenting, and to pray about it, have the Holy Spirit, have your convictions, have your reasons, and draw the line somewhere. Before I say goodbye for today, I want to remind you that if you would like to submit a question for a Q&A podcast episode, to go ahead and check out that link in the show notes. It is bit.ly/homeschool question. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.